There was a house at the end of the road. Old and crumbling, its roof sagged, and its windows were always dark. The wooden walls, once painted white, had long since faded to a sickly gray, eaten away by time and neglect. The people of the village avoided it, their steps quickening when they passed by. It wasn't just the house's decayed appearance that frightened them, it was the feeling that something inside was waiting. Legends grew over the years. Some said a family had once lived there but disappeared without a trace one stormy night. Others whispered that strange lights flickered in the windows during the dead of night and that, sometimes, if you listened closely, you could hear voices calling from within. Tom, a boy of 15, didn't believe in such things. To him, the house was just that, an old, forgotten building. His friends often spoke about the house with fear in their voices, but Tom always scoffed, saying they were just stories meant to scare little kids. One autumn night, when the wind howled and the moon hung low and pale in the sky, his friends dared him to go inside. 1 hour, that's all, his friend David said, a grin spreading across his face. If you stay there for 1 hour, we'll stop calling you chicken. Tom felt his pride sting. Fine, he said, trying to sound braver than he felt. I'll go. It's just an old house. As he approached the house, the road seemed longer than usual. The moonlight cast long shadows across the ground, and the wind whispered through the trees. The closer Tom got, the colder the air became. It was the kind of cold that seeped into his bones, making him shiver, though he told himself it was just nerves. When he finally reached the house, he stood still for a moment, staring at the dark windows. For a second, he thought he saw something move behind the cracked glass, a flicker of a shadow, but when he blinked, it was gone. Shaking his head, he pushed the heavy front door open. It groaned loudly, like the house itself was protesting his entry. Inside, the smell hit him first. A thick, musty odor, mixed with something sour and rotten. He wrinkled his nose and shone his flashlight around the room. The light danced over broken furniture, cobwebs clinging to every corner. The house seemed frozen in time, like it had been abandoned in the middle of someone's life. A table sat in the center of the room, its surface covered in dust, and a broken chair lay on its side near the cold fireplace. The silence was suffocating. Even the wind outside seemed to vanish once he stepped inside, leaving only the sound of his own breathing echoing in the vast emptiness. Tom moved cautiously, stepping over broken floorboards as he explored. The air felt wrong, heavy and thick, like the house was holding its breath. He hadn't been inside long when he heard a faint sound, like a soft sobbing, coming from somewhere deeper in the house. Tom froze, his heart pounding in his chest. For a moment, he told himself it was just the wind, maybe an animal caught inside. But the sound grew louder, more distinct. It was a woman's voice, low and filled with sorrow. Tom's legs felt like lead, but curiosity and the desire to prove his friends wrong pushed him forward. He followed the sound down a narrow hallway, his flashlight flickering as if the batteries were dying. The sobbing grew louder as he approached a door at the end of the hall. The door was slightly ajar, and through the crack, he could see only darkness. His hand trembled as he pushed the door open. The room beyond was small, with peeling wallpaper and a single window that was boarded up. In the center of the room was a large mirror, its glass so dirty and fogged that he couldn't see his reflection. But the sobbing had stopped. Tom felt a chill run down his spine. The silence was oppressive, like the house itself was waiting for him to do something. He stepped closer to the mirror, wiping the glass with his sleeve. For a moment, all he saw was his own reflection, his pale face, wide eyes, and the flashlight trembling in his hand. Then, behind him, something moved. He spun around, his breath catching in his throat, but there was nothing there. Just the empty, decaying room. He turned back to the mirror, and that's when he saw it. In the reflection, a figure stood behind him. It was tall and shadowy, its face hidden in darkness, but its eyes were glowing, bright and cold, staring at him with a hunger that made his blood run cold. Tom stumbled back, his heart racing. The figure in the mirror didn't move, but its eyes followed him. He wanted to run, to get out of the house, but his legs wouldn't obey. He was frozen in place, trapped by the gaze of the thing in the mirror. The figure's mouth opened, slowly, unnaturally wide, but no sound came out. The silence grew louder, pressing against Tom's ears until he thought his head would explode. Then, in a flash, the figure lunged forward, not from the room, but from the mirror itself, its hand stretching out of the glass, cold and wet, grabbing Tom by the shoulders. Tom tried to scream, but the sound was swallowed by the house. The figure pulled him toward the mirror, its grip icy and strong. He struggled, but it was no use. The last thing he saw before he was pulled into the darkness was his own terrified face reflected in the glass, forever trapped in the haunted house. The next morning, Tom's friends waited at the edge of the road, expecting him to come out laughing, bragging about how easy it was. But he never did. They never found him. Some say if you pass by the house at night, you can still hear him, his voice joining the other whispers that haunt the house at the end of the road.